Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Daffy's Roundtable. A lot of you guys know that I live in Canada, specifically in Ontario, and one topic we haven't discussed on the pod till now is native species here in Canada. So, in today's episode, I'm joined by Eric Woodley to talk about some of the really cool species we have here in Canada. We discuss the Massasauga rattlesnake, we discuss blue racers, we talk about all the cool species of turtles we have here, and then we touch on Eric's journey and Eric's story in the hobby. Eric has done a lot of really cool things in the hobby, from field work to working at Reptilia, a reptile zoo, and has a lot of knowledge on not just native species, but just reptiles in general. This was a super fascinating episode. I kind of just sat back and let Eric tell us all these really cool stories. I really enjoyed recording this, and I think you're going to really enjoy listening to it. But before we get into that, allow me to thank Exoterra for sponsoring this podcast and making this episode possible. Exoterra makes quality products for our pet reptiles to make them feel at home. One more thing, before we do get into the episode, if you're listening to this on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you listen to this podcast, I would really appreciate a subscribe, a comment, any form of engagement really helps us out. So thank you very much. And without further ado, everybody please help me welcome Eric Woodley. Eric, hello.
Hello.
I told you I was going to do the whole Eric.
that was dramatic.
I try to be. We gotta build the what's the word I'm looking for? We gotta build the excitement for this awesome episode that we're about to record. So we're starting strong. So hello, Eric.
Whoa, how are you?
How are you, man? Thank you
Good,
very much
man.
for
How are
coming
you?
on.
Yeah, no problem, man.
I'm doing great. I'm very excited to talk about this. This is actually a topic we have not discussed on this podcast at all. The majority of the listeners are actually from the US, not Canada. So, but I feel like we probably have quite a bit of overlap in terms of like native species.
Oh,
Am
yeah.
I right? Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
Cool. So for those of you listening, you kind of already got the gist of it. We're going to dive into some of the cool native species we have today. We have here in Canada. But before we do that, Eric, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the hobby.
It's honestly, it is a very long story, so I'll condense that one as well for you. And when I was like 19, I didn't even know what a mud puppy was. I remember catching one on Lake Nipissing, I believe it was. I was fishing with my dad. I pull it out of the water. Its little tiny little hands grab onto me, and I was just like, "Holy shit, Dad! It's a fish got feet." Threw it back in the hole. Never questioned it. Never looked it up. I started getting into the native species mainly through a friend of mine that had a mutual friend that we all kind of grew up in the same neighborhood, but I somehow never crossed paths with this guy. And he's now my very close, probably my best friend, and that's Kenny Ruland. So he was a friend that I made in my early 20s that me and him kind of hit it off in multiple ways, and that came off pretty wild, but
Pause.
no, we had a lot in common. We grew up in the same neighborhoods. We knew so many of the same people,
Cool.
and we both had this interest in just
Being outside.
animals. Being outside was the big one, and I was huge into fishing when I was younger, and I thought that that's what I was into. As I got more into fishing, I just realized this isn't. I don't like catch and release necessarily. Not that I have anything against it by any means. And I'm a fisherman again now, but I ended up dropping fishing entirely just because of the amount of gut hooked sunfish and poor little smallmouth bass at the dock that met their demise because I didn't know how to set a hook properly.
Dude, fishing in Ottawa sucks. Sucks.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but fishing here sucks. Anyway,
Yeah?
go ahead. Yeah.
So anyways, I always found myself when I go out with my dad that when I was fishing with them or whatever it'd be, I put down the rod and I'm going and rifling through the reeds looking for frogs. And snakes to me were something that I almost never encountered. I lived in Oshawa, so tiny little developed ecological dead zone essentially. Never really saw much. So first time I went up to like Lake Buckhorn, which is just north of all of that, I encountered a water snake for the first time. Pretty big one. And I went back, got my dad. I was like, Dad, there's a snake down here. I've never seen a snake before. This is sick. I brought him down, and God bless the man. He didn't know, but he said, "Oh, that's one of them cottonmouths. Stay away from them." And again, for years between the ages of like 15 to again like 19, I was just like, "Yeah, there's cottonmouths. Don't go near those things." And I just like kind of eased away from reptiles. Um, and for years, I just kind of like did like bushcraft and all that. I mean, I still kind of carry on that sort of weekend activity of the backcountry stuff, which is where I do get to see a lot of cool species and stuff like that. I do try and take some trips in and around some habitats that might be some really ideal spots for them. But yeah, essentially, I just kind of drifted around in outdoor activities, figuring out what I liked. Didn't find anything I really liked, and didn't have the funds or car at the time to go camping or do any of that stuff. And then someone would say, "Hey, did you ever meet this Kenny guy?" And I went, added him on Facebook one day, and our first interaction was him commenting on my Instagram post that I made of a DK brown snake that I was keeping at home, which
Cool.
unbeknownst to me, I shouldn't really have been doing, but this kid, cracked down on me like the MNR. And he was like, "You shouldn't be keeping that in captivity. Like, I'm gonna call this and that on you." And anyway, we ended up actually conversing pretty good, and we ended up meeting up one day. Drove out to Frontenac Park. We're like, we're gonna go look for whatever. Let's just go look for stuff.
Yeah.
And our main interest was snakes, maybe seeing a black rat snake, ribbon snake, something like that. And 2.5 hours into this walk, which was grueling and black fly filled, we came across a ribbon snake. And I was like, "Oh, cool. Like, that's really cool. Never seen one before." Like, I was enthusiastic. Kenny started like crying and freaking out.
Like it was because it
Like
was a
he was the most ecstatic. He was like, "It's a ribbon snake, dude. We got." Well, it's just you could hear him throughout the whole park.
yeah.
And it was at that moment I was like, "Holy shit, this guy really likes these things. There might be something to these." And as I started reading more and learning more and going out with him more, they became like unicorns, learning about their cryptic habits. Like, oh my god, there's 17 types of snakes that live here. I was like, holy shit, I'm
Really quickly, is that Ontario or Canada in general?
in Canada. Sorry, in Ontario.
Okay, cool. Continue. Yeah.
So I thought there was maybe garter snakes, water snakes. Never even heard that we had rattlesnakes. I hear there's 17 species from this book, and I'm like, this is wild. Learn there's 50 plus species overall, and it just became an infatuation with both me and him that we were like, we have to see every
All of them.
single one. So
That
me and
actually
him went, we're younger. We didn't really have any, lived with our parents still. We didn't have really bills to pay. So we spent all our money just driving around Ontario,
that's awesome.
looking at maps, looking at old historical maps from books, seeing where the habitat might still be. And there was a couple of spots where we went and found things where things hadn't been seen in 50 years. And or at least recorded. I'm sure they were seen by local people, but they're just not recording that stuff, right? But either way, we just went across Ontario, and within a few years, we pretty much cranked every species off our bucket list.
That's awesome.
We slowed down a little bit, and Kenny had already had like a small little thing where he was doing a not-for-profit, sorry. It was just like a outreach education programming where he was taking animals that he had, and a friend of his, Matt Ellerbeck, which some people may know that name. Matt used to be a fantastic educator and conservationist. He's since just changed professions, and but either way, they had this reptile and amphibian advocacy, which they basically would go out to schools and camps and things like that, and local festivals, and do displays, tables, educational shows with the snakes, the turtles, salamanders, things like that. I eventually started doing that with Kenny. That was our main thing that we did. That was our bread and butter for a while. There was a point where me and him were booking like a pretty significant amount of shows every year by the point we were into it. Um, Unfortunately, it wasn't viable long term for us, mostly due to the money factor, unfortunately, which money talks, and
Yeah,
it just
absolutely.
started becoming a bit unviable as we grew older. We had more bills to pay. It's like, okay, we can't drive 5 hours with all these animals, pay for our own accommodations, and then walk away with like $100 honorarium sort of thing each. Which at the time, like our first time getting paid to do something like that, we were like, this is sick. No way. Eventually, it just didn't become viable. Um, it's I can barely remember the timeline of how we got into field work and stuff like that. But basically, we used to do the Lakes and Trails Festival down at the Friends of the Kingston Inner Harbor there. Where there's a lot of map turtles and things like that nesting. And a local woman there that ran the Friends of Kingston Inner Harbor, or was at least a member of it, she took notice of me and Kenny, and she essentially sparked our entire career by just being like, "Hey, do you guys want to? Do you guys want some funding? And we'll get some nest covers for the turtles, and maybe we can get a study going." And we were like, "Yeah, like for sure." And she ended up getting us funding, materials. We had nest covers. We were going a whole harbor front line. We would be putting down the nest covers and monitoring the nests and educating people along the way that they're going along, talking to people in the public, setting up signs. And then we started doing a study on the map turtles in the harbor. More so Kenny, because Kenny lived in Kingston. I lived in Oshawa. So I'd only be able to help out on weekends when I was available. But either way, we would go out, we would catch map turtles, we would mark them, and we were tracking their movements and just seeing what they were doing, because everyone was just kind of like, oh, they just show up in spring and they disappear. And they're like, where do they go? And then eventually it became very useful because then there was a property that wanted to have a development built. And they wanted to build right up to the shoreline there where a lot of the turtles were actually nesting and basking and gestating and things like that. So me, Kenny, in partnership with, I'm going to be wrong on this potentially, but Queen's University. It has to have been Queen's.
I would say it's most likely Queens because they have the
It's
cubes, the biological station.
yeah, it was that it was Queen's. I don't know why I questioned that.
Yeah.
So basically conducted a study and figured out where the turtles were growing via radio trackers. And this was the first time we ever got to use that sort of equipment, which was awesome. And they would catch the turtles, we'd slap the transmitters on them, and then we would take it out and track them by boat. And eventually we tracked down where they were actually overwintering. And this prevented not only a lot of the development along that tannery shoreline, but then actually a bridge development that was potentially, while construction was going on, would have completely blocked that migratory route and pushed them to going up and onto the roadway. But with all that tracking information, just there was no way that they could argue it. Just that's where they're going, and they have protection at that time. So they weren't able to do those things, and they had to push that bridge, and they had to, really mitigate that development. That, as far as I know, they did end up going forward with. But the amount of mitigation that they put in place, they had to build it further back from the shoreline. They weren't allowed to do anything to all the front stuff, like all the basking logs and all that had to stay. And then they did a little bit of development and pathways on the actual inner harbor. And while we were in there, they also got us to kind of consult on where we should be putting nesting beaches, basking logs, things like that, just to ensure that anything that they did take away was replaced at almost times two, just to make sure that the turtles had what they needed. And as far as I know, all those projects are they're done now, but the turtles are just kind of doing their thing down there, and they seem to be doing pretty well, and they're well monitored by the Friends of Kingston Inner Harbor every year, so it's pretty nice. Don't let me ramble like that, buddy. I'll go for a
Dude,
while.
I'm gonna shut up and let you ramble for the rest of this episode. That is a fascinating story. I had no idea you did any of that. I don't even know where to start asking you questions. So first of all, it was the map turtles you were doing this for?
Yeah, northern map turtles.
Very cool, very cool. And this was, you said, in collaboration with several different, like the I think you said Reptile and Amphibian Advocacy, and then it was with Queens University, and then so when did you stop doing this and why?
Mostly they stopped because the information was founded. We got what we needed. We knew where their migratory route was up the river, into where they would overwinter, um, and that was pretty much it. The population's relatively stable there. They still deal with like illegal fishing equipment being tangled in that, which unfortunately is just something that's going to continue to have to be dealt with. But for map turtles, the biggest issue for them is propeller strikes because they have a really good habit of aqua basking, so they'll just float on the surface there,
Mm-hmm.
and then they get hit by boats there that are cruising by. So they're pretty big sufferers of that, and road mortality. But down there, road mortality isn't such an issue just because they don't necessarily need to go up into the roadways. They kind of go into the park, they nest, and they come back. There's definitely been a few that have been hit on the roads, um, but it's not necessarily their biggest problem. Their big one is fishing. People just, dead baiting, leaving
Yeah.
dead cut bait and hoping for catfish and stuff, which is fine. But unfortunately, more often than not, turtles are the ones that find that bait first. And then they completely swallow those hooks. And a lot of the time, fishermen, they see a snapping turtle or a large map turtle on the end, they cut the line. That's it.
Yeah.
Um, it doesn't rot out in their stomach or anything. That's pretty much just a death sentence for them, unfortunately.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, as far as I know, Queen's University continued to monitor those turtles for quite a period after. But me and Kenny, we started to just kind of divert our attention away to other projects. We both got very lucky where a friend of ours was doing his master's down on Pelee Island, and he was working with the racers. And he was like, "Hey, I need a couple hands, and I have a bit of funding." So that was our kind of like next dive into field work. We did get very lucky where we were asked one year to come up and just kind of participate with the Georgian Bay Land Trust on some surveys of the islands. I'm just doubling back because of the timeline. Georgian Bay Land Trust called us up there and they said, "Hey, just come see how to do things." We went up there with Blazing Star Environmental. It was fantastic. We went
I've heard of
around.
them. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Moving around, found quite a few species at risk on the islands that they were looking to potentially add to their property lists. And yeah, it was a really good learning experience for me and Kenny. Learned kind of how field work is going to work, how you go about surveying. And yeah, Georgian Bay Land Trust was fantastic. And just, like they boated us out there in this little 16-foot tin boat and like 6-foot waves. I was 100% sure I was going to die. Uh,
So
the gentleman that I cannot remember his name, but he was an absolute animal. He was flying across that bay like 60 kilometers an hour in that thing, and I was just like, "Oh God, if I'm gonna get anywhere, I'm getting there with this guy." And we pull up, and it's like this old, very old cabin that seemingly is abandoned, but they had access to, I guess, and stayed there for a few nights, surveying the islands, looking for musk turtles and snappers and fox snakes and rattlers and pretty much anything that we could find out there. Um, we found quite a bit. So it was a very good learning experience. And then, yeah, we moved on to going down to Pelee every spring. Originally, it started. So we were just doing a kind of like a board study down there, just kind of assessing the populations of the racers and stuff. And
And
again,
by
I will
board
not.
study, sorry to interrupt, but by board
Yeah.
study, you mean you go out ahead of time, you put down boards,
Yeah.
and then you come back and you check under them, see how many racers you can find?
Yeah, like big board transects. I can't remember the number now. And again, I'll not take any credit for this entirely because the main two lads that did the majority of all that, Ryan Wolf and Taylor Kennedy, they were the main project people for at least for the beginning. And Ryan, he was the one doing his masters. So, I mean, he's the racer god. I'll give him all that all day. But we went down, and originally it was the board study, and then we were trying to enhance some of the habitat because although the species of tree, as far as I know, is a native species, it just really started to encroach on a lot of the already limited savanna habitats that were remaining. So we would go in with and do mechanical brush removal, use loppers, and just clear areas to allow some of that grassland habitat, the alvar, to kind of recover there and not just get so choked out because that's not what the racers like. So
Yeah, and while you were doing all this, none of this was your full-time job. This was essentially just you
yeah,
doing
I
the field
worked.
work
I
for the
worked at
employment.
Freshco. I worked at
Okay.
Freshco.
Wow. So when did you stop doing all the field work and start start working for Reptilia? Was Reptilia the next step or was there something in between?
I so I basically kind of was yeah. It got to a point where again the field work wasn't super viable all the time. And
There's never enough funding.
I took a part-time contract with the land between at the time. And I was only working part-time at Freshco. So I wrote them a letter and I was like, hey guys, I got this really cool opportunity. It's just a limited time, just basically during the nesting season for turtles. And I'm just wondering if I can kind of do this. I can still work on weekends, but during the week, I'd like to be able to take this contract and take this opportunity. Had it all in writing. And unfortunately, I came back to my job and they had terminated me the day after I'd left. So I didn't, I think they did that knowing that I was kind of younger and whatever. They kind of thought that I would just be like, oh, okay, that sucks. Well, no, no. My dad is quite the Karen, and he, not even a Karen, the man's an absolute animal. And he was like, yeah, that's not how that works. We're going to go and we're going to go through the employment board. And I ended pretty unfortunately with with the Sobeys company, but for them, I was compensated well due to that unfortunate event. Mostly they just tried to jack me of 5 years of severance, which was wrong. So
Yeah.
um, anyway, all that aside, between Freshco, I quit Freshco, and then I took a job again for the Georgian Bay Turtle Hospital, where I was surveying specifically for Blandings turtles, where I was going out and I was trying to find gaps. I would go and have all the data maps, and I'd be looking for essentially gaps in these populations that are either just unreported or why is that gap there? So find one of two answers. So I would go do a lot of road surveying, just looking for any. Literally, I was peeling pieces the size of half a saltine cracker, just pulling little pieces of plastron off the road, trying to ID it, and it's mostly how I spent a late summer. For about 2 months, I did that, where I was just going around and surveying and all these gaps, trying to find out is there any turtles here that just aren't reported, or is there just none here? I did fill a few gaps, but there was also gaps that I was like, yeah, there's probably a good reason there's none here. It's farms.
So
So
there wasn't any turtles there or in certain
yeah,
areas.
yeah, so that's essentially what it was. But a lot of that turned into finding turtles injured on the road, and I'd ferry them down to the OTTCC, um, finding other species at risk, and then having to take data on them, eastern hognose snakes, things like that. And then, yeah, after that, I applied to Reptilia, which I don't know why it took me so long to apply there. It was there, and I don't know why I never did. But I applied, and then it's quite some time actually after that I applied. I think I was just on EI in that time. And unfortunately, it was like right before COVID came around. So I got this
Mm,
job. I'm like, holy shit, I work at a reptile zoo. This is
yeah.
it.
One of the coolest ones too.
I think I was about 3 weeks in, and they were like, yeah, sorry, we're fucked. We have to like lay everybody off pretty
So
much.
what happened? They laid you off. Who was taking care of the animals in this time?
So what happened was I still had enough EI built up from all my past employment where I said, hey, I'd be happy to work and come in and take care of the animals. And I basically got my 3 weeks of good training. And then COVID hit, and then it was me and maybe another 2 people at the time that would come in incrementally throughout the week and just ensure the animals were all set up. They all had their care. They were all fed. Thankfully, at the time during COVID, our collection was also quite a bit smaller than it is now. I do believe our collection's grown quite a bit since I've been there, just in regards to we have the ability to take on more rescues and just help out a little more. So we've definitely taken on more animals, I feel, than they originally had. So
Yeah.
yeah, I worked for a few months during COVID before I was ever on payroll. Which again, I kind of get it. Your entire income is based off admission. You don't have
Yeah.
that happening, you can hemorrhage out pretty quickly. And so that's fine. It's not me holding any sort of like resentful grudge about it. It is what it is, and I was still on EI, and I was okay. I was still living at home, so I didn't really have anything to worry about. And I was like, dude, I get to go in and fucking work with snakes and lizards all day. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Eventually, obviously, COVID passed along.
Yeah.
Life became semi-normal again. But in that time of COVID, their way of paying me back was mentoring me a lot. I got a lot of really good mentorship there from, I don't know if they really want me name dropping them. They're all pretty little social little weirdos. But my lead keeper, who
Yes.
she arguably has been the biggest mentor.
Cool.
Not only in just knowledge and just how to run a zoo in a way that she's been running it for years now, which is one of the more functionally sensible things I have ever been a part of. Like, her systems are just so organized. Everything is just that label maker, that thing gets a workout, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm so thankful for it because I'm also a huge visual learner. So walking in and being like, oh my God, I can see where everything is. This is
Yeah.
great. She's super knowledgeable about tons of the animals, tons of the care, great with the guests. And she's just been a really good trainer over the years. And, my general manager as well, he's a big part of the animal care team as well.
Yeah.
And he's also a huge mentor to me as well. I've said
Yeah.
it as well about 30 times now, but
All good. That's part of the podcast. We're just having a normal conversation, right?
yeah. And then another guy, when we, during COVID, another facility unfortunately had a rough go, and they had to surrender a pretty significant size of their reticulated python collection. We took that on from them. I believe it was 24 or 26 snakes. All of them at least 10 feet plus. So it was a pretty significant labor increase that happened. So for a long time, I was mentored by a guy that works at our other location in Toronto there, and he taught me pretty much everything I know about reticulated pythons, which I think I've made it pretty evidently clear in a lot of things. If anyone does follow me, or you do at least, I'm a big fan of the retics, and it's for so many reasons. And he really mentored me in just safety and just how to read the animal's body languages. And they essentially paid me back and paying a lot of attention to me, and it paid off, I'd like to think, clearly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm pretty
Absolutely.
okay at my job, I'd like to think.
Yeah. No, you're very good at your job. And for those of you listening, if you want sort of more of a visual, I will link in the description my tour of Reptilia, and you can kind of see Eric take us around and talk about the retakes, and you can see some of those retakes. One retake. But anyway, yeah. Sorry, proceed. Yeah, this is so fascinating, bro. Yeah, go ahead.
And yeah, I mean, I've always tried to keep in touch a little bit with field work, and then I got the most special one was kind of going back to seeing all the species in Ontario. I mean, I thought blue racer was never going to be one I saw. Being part of that field work, obviously, I got to be very fortunate to be able to see many of them. One even named after me. So it's that was one of the biggest privileges I ever have
That's very
had
cool.
was working with those animals and working with those people. I made lifelong friends from that field team, um, and that field team's still alive to this day in regards to still conducting all that work. Which every once in a while, if I get the time, I can get down there and go throw myself back in some thorn bushes after a big blue snake. It's a good time.
That is awesome. Okay. So maybe let's jump to some of the native species. Dude,
Mhm.
I've known you for a while. I did not know any of that story for some reason, and I think I'm gonna throw all the questions I had out of the window. And like I have so many more. Like, dude, I'm fascinated right now. What an incredible story. Um, I don't even know where to start. Okay, first of all, let's jump back to the ribbon snake that you mentioned earlier. I believe I've seen one before. It is a Thamnophis species? Is
Yeah,
the ribbon snake a garter snake? Because this is like, could you explain, kind of break down the difference between them?
same family, different species.
Different species. Okay.
Um, couple differences between them. Like they're both Hymenopus, but they're very different animals. Um, ribbon snakes, I describe them as a high definition 4K garter snake.
They have the
Their
yellow
lines are
venom and
typical.
everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
everything's typically very clean on them. They're a little more slender and sleek. But key identifier on a ribbon is the white scale in front of the eye. There's always going to be that there. And then they also typically have a little bit of burgundy kind of along their side lateral. Um, but yeah, ribbon snakes, they're basically just like, yeah, like a high definition athletic garter snake.
that's very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And the blue racers, what species is that? And are they? I assume they're not super common. I didn't even know we had them here. Is there? Are most of these snakes, let's call like the 17 species that are native in Ontario, are they mostly spread out to certain areas? So they're not all covering all of Ontario, right? Does my question make
No,
sense?
not all of them. No, there's a few that are definitely like one is literally landlocked to a point where they're exclusively on Peely Island, the racers.
Okay,
Um,
interesting.
and I mean, they're obviously very at risk. There's probably under 300 of them. I can't really remember
Wow.
the the generous guesstimate that we gave, but um, yeah, there's not many of them left in Canada, and there's no room for them back on the mainland. Unfortunately, all their habitats now farmland and greenhouses, and anywhere that is left, if you do introduce them, it can potentially just completely throw off any balance. So, and they're not an easy species to keep in captivity, which some American keepers might laugh at that, which is totally fair. But blue racers are absolutely skittish, and they get really prone to rubbing and all that. You have to provide them a really, really big space and really work with them so that they're not absolute nutballs. Because in any experience I've had, they're absolute nutcases, and those things can really move really fast.
Are they really that blue?
In some cases, yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, yeah,
Dude, I
like
thought I
some
knew what you were talking about.
in
I absolutely did
in
not.
Michigan, as far as I know, in Michigan, they get some that are incredibly blue. But I've seen some down on the island that are gorgeous, and some of the other field team have seen, and they're just yeah, they're very blue. They have like a copper nose, black mask, um, smooth scales, very fast, very fast, very hard
Very.
to catch.
And they are a colubrid. Are they part of the rat snake
Yep,
family? Or like what?
not
What
rat snakes. So
sorry.
they're coluber, constrictor, foxy.
Yeah.
So they're just part of the whole like racer family. They're just believe it's just a subspecies. I'm potentially very wrong on that, but yeah.
I
So
it looks
they're
on Google. It looks like they are just a
yeah,
subspecies. Yeah.
yeah, they definitely are. But yeah, they're a very interesting snake. overall, again, I'm not the speak all on racers. Ryan is definitely the guy for that, but they are extremely intelligent, very, very much visually oriented hunters. And yeah, unfortunately, on the island there, they were persecuted for quite a long time. And for a while there, as far as I know, um, there was a lot of stigma around them because if they were found on your property, you weren't going to be able to develop anything or build even a shed or anything like that. So a lot of people they didn't like the biologists.
Right.
And as far as I
Which
know,
I'm
like
sure is still a common thing.
or like late '90s, early 2000s, biologists were not overly welcome around the island there. Um, and as far as I know, nowadays that's totally the opposite. Ryan and that whole team are just some of the most friendly, charismatic people, and they're also so knowledgeable. Combine all those things, and you get them chatting with the locals. The the views have totally changed. Some properties that you could never have dreamed to access, they're like, yeah, come on, come look for the snakes. Like they're just so accepting. People offering houses for people to stay in, and it's great. And
That's awesome.
yeah,
That is
um,
awesome. So okay, so on the Massasauga rattlesnake, which is something I've been excited to talk to you about as well. I know there's some like Little Ray's, the company I worked for, Toronto Zoo. There's some I don't know what to call them, rehabilitation programs. They're breeding them, re-releasing them, that kind of stuff. Are they super endangered right now?
so the thing here, it's the species survival program. So there's a
Yeah, SSB. Yes.
tons of facilities involved in that throughout Canada and the States. And yeah, they're just trying to kind of create genetic diversity and trying to just bolster some spots that dealt with a lot of either development, persecution. Ojibwe down in Windsor, there, the Ojibwe Prairie, that was the big one that a big portion of the snakes are going to be potentially going to at one point or another, um, because they were almost entirely, I think, as far as I know, they were completely killed out of there. And so they're just part of reintroductory programs, and they're just kind of making sure that there's genetic diversity and to bolster up populations. Yeah, and yeah, there's a few different facilities involved in that, and I'm actually really lucky. I've gotten to work with some of the snakes in some of those facilities, and talk to a lot of the people that are a big part of those projects. And yeah, it's a great thing that they're doing. It's one hell of a job. It's
Yeah.
one heck of a project they got going, but it's good. And they're not. I mean, I'm not going to say they're not super endangered. I mean, considering where they used to live, yeah, they're really reduced to where they formerly used to be, and all of where they live now is, I mean, it's heavy in the cottage country, right? So they might be
I
there, but their habitat's kind of compromised in many ways with roads, and roads are the big killer of them as well.
roads like they get hit by
Yeah,
cars frequently.
yeah, getting
Okay.
run over.
Yeah. I have gone out looking for them and I've never found one. I've never been able to see one in the wild. How commonly do you see them when you're out on your adventures?
Um, I mean, depends. If I'm going specifically to look for them, there's there's definitely some spots that I know that I can go and I can at least 50-50 see one. There's a couple spots I know that are almost guaranteed, but there are also spots that are like they're so sensitive. They're so sensitive because of how small some of these spots are. Um, and at the end of the day, the snakes, when you do go and see them, as much as yeah, maybe they're not running away or whatever it may be, uh, I try and keep everything pretty. I try and stay as far away as I can. If I notice them shift at all, I'm gone. I leave. I don't want them, if they're gestating or anything like that, I don't want to disturb them where they are. I have a long lens, so if I want to take photos, I can do it from 30 yards away and I don't have to worry. Obviously, you can be closer than that, but yeah, I do my best to be hands off as much as I can. There's instances where you are not able to be completely like undisturbing because you walk right up onto them and you're like, oh shit, hi, you're right there. And sometimes they're on the move, so they're already cruising around and doing their thing. So you got to kind of work with them, and you just got to give them their space mainly. But yeah, it's I kind of diverted there. I When I actively go out looking for them, I can find them pretty consistently, but it's only in a few select areas. If I just go out to a random area that I've never been before, the likelihood that I find one is just as good as anyone else.
Can you take me out to see them?
Yeah, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. Yeah,
Are they live bearers?
they are. Yeah, so they,
Are all rattlesnake live bearers? Sorry to interrupt you again.
as far as I know,
Cool. Okay.
I think so. Yeah, yeah. I don't know why I'm questioning that. They are.
Yeah.
Oh, you got me after work, fatty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah. It's all good. It's okay. It's okay to question things. That's the beauty of the podcast. It's just like I said, it's just a conversation, which currently I'm very fascinated by, man. I don't even, like I said, I don't even know where to go from here because there's so many ideas in my head about all of this stuff. But what's the most elusive snake, like native snake, that you struggle to find or out of the 17, what was the hardest one to find? I guess other than the racer, because that's
The racers are hard in their own way, just due to where they are. The fact that like they're not a like easy to spot snake, and 90% of the time you just see the grass move, and you're like, I think that was a racer,
yeah.
and it's gone now. Um, there's again people that might be, Taylor, for example, one of the field techs. The guy is an animal when it comes to finding things. He finds everything, and I mean, he stayed on that island in a tent for, as far as I know, like the entire summer.
Wow,
And I mean,
dedication.
he was finding them pretty often. So if you put yourself there, and you're there all the time, and you start learning how they're behaving, and it's mostly like timing of the day and dumb luck, really. Um, so yeah, other than the racers though, Eastern hognose and smooth greens. Smooth greens, they're just random. I find they're like almost bycatch when you're looking for anything else. They just show up out of nowhere, and I know I walk past so many of them, but they're
Don't see
so
them.
green and they're so good at hiding. They pretend to be a little waving piece of grass when they're in the grass, so they just wave back and forth, back and forth. You never spot them. The only time I ever really see them is when I flip them randomly, or like I think it was 2 weekends ago. Um, Someone just like stepped into like a pile of dirt, and it just shot out of the pile of dirt. I was like,
That's
oh,
awesome.
there's a green. Um,
Are
Only
they
time I can
almost?
ever. So go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. No,
No,
go
no,
ahead.
you're good.
I was
You
gonna
go.
say, are they seasonal? Like, is there a time of year where you tend to see more green rough snakes, or there's a time of year where you might see more eastern hognose, or is it just location, not season?
It's a lot of factors. It's location, season, weather, and like sometimes I've even noticed like pre-thunderstorm, some snakes just know it's coming and they start cruising around, and you're like, oh shit, snakes are just popping out of nowhere. Um, Other times in super dry periods, you'll just notice it is very hard to kind of time certain ones, but like early spring is probably the best time because they're all emerging and they're either conjugated. So I mean, it's kind of good because if you find them, if you find the right spot, you'll probably find one. But if you don't, then you ain't gonna find nothing.
Right. Yeah. Which
um,
is my experience.
and some of these snakes, like they do travel pretty significant distances come spring, and then they move into like summer areas, and yeah, hognoses are extremely cryptic, especially in the southern populations where they just live in like sand and savanna grasslands and stuff. They live underground most of the year. They're just burrowed away, and they're active in like the early morning, and they don't like it too hot. I've noticed at least. Um, so yeah, they're burrowed all the time. So it's really you probably walk past dozens of them and you just never know. Maybe not dozens, but you're walking past them and you don't know. And
With
then
my
up
luck,
in
I doubt it.
and then up like as soon as you hit like the Canadian Shield for any species, they sometimes get a lot harder, but hognoses are I find way harder up on the Shield, mostly because there's just so much surface area. There's so many nooks, crevices, and crannies that they can just go jam themselves in and be content. And to check every one of those, be up there your whole life. So there's
Yeah,
just so many networks under all that granite that like there's no way to check it all, right? And you're probably walking past again. Like the other week, we were up walking a coastline that we knew there was fox snakes, and we walked it. We didn't see nothing. 6 pretty eagle-eyed search image prone people for those snakes, and the next day, someone found like 5 of them just out breeding and doing their thing in the exact same spot. So timing, it's also it's just pure luck sometimes in regards to that. Like, um, for years when me and Kenny were doing it, we just mapped out so many places. And like
have you ever herped in Ottawa?
honestly, the only time I've ever gone to Ottawa was to go see an owl. I drove like 300 kilometers to come see an owl. It was really cold.
Gray.
No, it was honestly, it wasn't even a great gray. It was literally a screech owl. I was like, I've never seen one. I know where it is. I'm gonna go see it.
Yeah.
Me and Kenny drove for like 3 hours.
Well, it's hilarious because I've been in Ottawa for 10 years and I've never seen one. So that's you really beat me here. You said 17 species of snake. I think in all my experiences herping, I think I've only ever seen 3. So I don't know if they're just not here in Ottawa or I've just heard.
Ottawa's definitely got a lower like snake biodiversity, I would say. You don't have rattlesnakes, you don't have hognose, you don't
No.
have rat snakes up there, I don't think.
Hmm.
No.
I've seen
They're close, but not there.
Eastern milk, I believe.
Milk snakes, smooth greens, red bellies, DKs, ringnecks, maybe.
Nope. I think a ribbon once.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen garters 1,000 times.
Yeah.
That's basically like, as far as I'm concerned, that's basically the only snake we have here. I've seen the Eastern once, and yeah, I think the red bellies once.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, up that way, as far as I know, there's probably like there's a lot less diversity in regards to snake species. And like I think less numbers for sure. Like as far as I remember, anytime I've been up at least like, the Algonquin kind of area, most I ever really see is garter snakes, maybe a water snake. But yeah, that kind of tracks, honestly.
Cool. So on that topic, maybe I'll ask you about a bit of a negative topic here. Let's talk about the Bill 5, right?
Yeah. Yeah, really
Tell me.
devastating thing to Ontario, which I mean, I'll just kind of compact it real quick, which again,
Yeah.
I'm not like again the most fully educated one on it, but the baseline of it
Yeah.
is they're going to strip most real protections for migratory birds, wetland habitats, and just species at risk in general. It's essentially just to allow them to cut red tape on a lot of development projects and things like that. The big one was they can basically make reclassifications on what is or is not endangered and what is and is not worthy of protection on their
How
own.
dangerous is this for native species?
Sorry.
How dangerous is this bill
Oh,
passing?
it's one of the most, if not the most catastrophic like thing that's happened in like our provincial government for all of our like wild area, not even just like species at risk, just like the wetland part of it alone just allows like pretty much like pay a small fee and you can pillage whatever you want. It's just going to be like a pay to kill sort of thing, which is horrible because at the end of the day, it's all based off of, from what I've collected from a few people that are, again, a little more well versed in it, the red-sided dace, which is a small species of minnow, and it's basically occupying this stream system that's preventing Doug Ford from building a highway. The only way to stop that is to gut the entire Endangered Species Act. So in the process of him attempting to get rid of this one thing, he's going to cause catastrophic damage to everything surrounding them. Migratory bird thing is horrible. That's just people can just, migratory birds just aren't going to be protected anymore properly. And I can imagine this is also going to affect a lot of people's jobs. Obviously, if there's less need for proper environmental consultation, then there's going to be less need for environmental consultants. And it's tough because when you just have these essentially developers that are like, yeah, we'll do it ourselves, they have no idea what they're looking for. And again, they're not going to care. They'll just pay to kill whatever's there, and that's that. Yeah, honestly, there's not much more to add to that one. It's pretty depressing. It's one that there's still people are really fighting to repeal it because it's also hugely encroaching on Indigenous people's rights and like treaties also. And that part again, I'm probably the most least versed on that end of it. But it's encroaching on so many different things. And as far as I know, they dropped like a consultation by a plane into a reserve last week, basically saying like, yeah, we're going to go ahead and like do what we're going to do. Thanks for the consultation. It was like, you didn't even get it. You didn't even land. Threw this thing out of a fucking plane.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's horrible. People are obviously it's not going to stop people from fighting and from doing the work that needs to be done. But unfortunately, a lot of that work is just going to get undone pretty quickly, I think.
So just so I understand, this bill has already passed. This is
as far as I'm aware, it passed last week.
Okay.
And yeah, it's I'm not sure how much effect it's taken yet, but it's pretty much a matter of time, unfortunately.
And you said people are trying to reappeal it, I think is what you said.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we can do as, I don't know, citizens, animal lovers, or whatever? Is there anything else that we can do to kind of fight this?
The only thing that we really can do as the common citizen is to email and send mails and letters to your local MPP, just how damaging not only this is to just the animals and the habitats themselves, but at the end of the day, it's damaging to us when you just allow pay to pillage. It's destroying things for generations to come. We sit here and ride this pedestal that Canada is the most beautiful country. We have all these natural resources, and we're just gonna screw them over. It just does not make any sense. And people can be like, well, we gotta open Ontario for development. You need to improve the economy. This is not going to do it. I'm going to tell you that right now, because the only people that are going to benefit from these new highways are the foreign investors that will own them, just like the 407. So it's the same deal. It doesn't matter.
Spain, right?
Yeah. So it's all just for money. It's all profit. It's all Ford lining the pockets of all of his little buddies while he can. And I'm just,
Mr. Dougie. Yeah,
Dougie.
It's fascinating because and we won't dive into this as well, but just today as we're recording this, they just dropped the
Rob Ford one.
What's it called?
I don't know what it was called, but
you're talking about the documentary.
Yeah, the documentary on Netflix about Rob Ford.
I watched that last night.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, because I wasn't in Canada when Rob Ford was mayor.
Oh, okay.
So I had no idea. I had no idea anything like that. But I've been here for 10 years and I've heard people talk about him.
Okay,
several times.
Pause.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna learn something about you.
Yeah.
Where'd you come from, man?
Well, yeah. I was
like we've never.
Yeah. We've never actually
hit me with a life history real quick.
Okay. So I was born and raised in Abu Dhabi, which is an hour from Dubai. So I'm not from there. Like my family's from Palestine, Jordan area.
Yeah.
Uh, but I was born and raised in Abu Dhabi, and then I came here for university and I never left.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Canada is, as you said, Canada's beautiful, man. Like
Yeah.
just the not that the Middle East isn't beautiful, and they each have their own different beauties, but the just the ability to adventure here and just see wildlife and
Oh yeah, man.
it's just there's something special about Canada. So I never left. Um, and but anyway, so yeah, so I had no idea. I had no idea any of that stuff that was happening with Rob Ford because I always kept an eye on Canada because I was a Canadian citizen and I wanted to find out more. But I had no idea what was happening, and then I watched the documentary last night, and I was like, "Oh my god,
We
it was,
lost. We lost the wrong forward, man.
yeah, that's
People
what it
can
seems like."
chalk that guy up all they want. Rob Ford was the man.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Good to know. Yeah. No, but so that wasn't even what I was talking about. That is a good documentary. I fell asleep watching it, so I don't know where I left off, but from everything I saw, it's definitely worth a watch for anyone that's interested. Um, but yeah, it was all before my time in Canada, so
Yeah.
it was a learning experience for me to watch that for sure. But
Yeah.
no, what I was talking about is the other bill that they're trying to pass now that's screwing over hobbyists.
Yeah, I only
We-
just read that today, which also
yeah,
it affects zoos. It affects me
so
as a
that's
hobbyist and a zookeeper.
and a zookeeper. Yeah, so that's that. I mean, I don't know if either of us have enough information right now to dive into that because I think that was just I think that came out today. Pulls out the phone.
Oh, let's do a little quick read
Yeah.
here.
Well, so I did the lazy thing as I tend to do, and I threw it into ChatGPT. So
Nice.
here's just real quickly. Here's what ChatGPT says. What this means for you as a hobbyist: short-term and casual keepers might now need a license, even if they weren't regulated before. Um, Breeders and sellers will definitely need to comply with stricter rules. Hobbyists with venomous or dangerous species should be especially careful. They need to meet higher enclosure and security standards, plus detailed logs and possible trade restrictions. Local rules may become even stricter on top of provincial licensing. Look, the grand picture from what I'm understanding is it's horrible for hobbyists because essentially it takes out the freedom of being able to keep reptiles.
Yeah, yeah,
That being said, I've said this on the podcast before. I'm not completely opposed to the idea of people needing permits or to apply to permits because that's gonna take out all the people that just
Hoard.
do it. Yeah, hoard or just do it for the sake of doing it, even when they see the dollar sign, regardless of what they
Yeah.
think of the animals. But
Such a major problem that is.
Exactly. So there is pros and cons to it, but I think they're taking it too far in a certain way. Like you're now like on the zoo side of things. I don't even know if you guys can operate without special permits now. Like I'm sure you already need all these permits to be able to
Yeah, yeah,
own a reptile zoo, but it sounds like you're gonna need even more permits now. Um, Breeding reptiles, if you're gonna need to register every single baby and who you're selling it to, like a lot of people are gonna lose business. A lot of people are gonna lose money.
yeah.
So anyway, I don't understand very much of what's happening. I'm still looking into it. A lot of people send it to me today and we're like, hey, you need to speak up about this. And I'm like, I'm not speaking up about something I don't understand yet. So
Yeah, hold the phone. Give me a
Hold
few
on.
days.
Yeah, exactly. This just came out. Let me do some research and then we can figure it out. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, I just brought it up since we were talking about crazy bills that seem to be passing here in Canada. But um, we'll jump off that to maybe, dude. We need another episode. Before we keep going, we need another episode because we're already at an hour, and I have like 100 more questions to ask you. So I'm gonna ask you a few more, just so we can sort of get some other interesting information in this episode, and then if you're down, we need to do a part two. But anyway, so. Let's touch on Reptilia a little bit. So continuing your life story, you worked in Reptilia, you finished. COVID's passed. Let's jump in time a little bit.
Yeah.
You are now um, one of the head keepers at Reptilia Whitby, I believe. Um, And one of the yeah, go
Not
ahead.
a. I'm just one of the long-term keepers. I'm not the lead. I'm not a head by any means. Every
But you have a lot of
keeper on the
responsibility under
team,
you.
yeah, like I may be trained a little bit higher on certain animals than some of the other keepers, but they also have some strong suits that I do not carry, as in like efficiencies in technology.
Okay.
Buddy, I'm like a caveman.
What kind of
That's
technology do you even use at the zoo?
We're implementing all sorts of new technology right now in regards to record keeping is all being converted over to a digital record keeping system where we're going to be actually having like full enrichment logs for every animal and which we should have probably had a while ago, but we have pretty detailed logs as it is right now, but we're switching over to all that. And just, I don't want to admit it, but like, yeah, I'm real bad with like technology and somehow cameras when it comes to getting photos onto computers correctly. Um, and some of those, like one of the keepers there, she's very efficient in uh, like meds. So she's like a vet technician, as far as I know, and kind of what she's aiming towards being is a veterinary. So she's very diligent in regards to like noticing things with animals, right? Like we're all pretty like eyes open and we all make note of things. But she's got like special attention to detail for a lot of the smaller little guys. The other keepers, again, I'm not going to name drop any of them, but the other two, sorry, the other one, I mean, you met her. She's fantastic with community outreach, organizing programs. She's a fantastic educator.
I believe if we're thinking
Um,
of the same person, I believe that's the person that gave me the opportunity to come
yeah,
film. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So she's great in that regard. And then the other keeper is probably just one of the most hardworking, routine. Like there's just like certain jobs I know I don't even have to go look at because this girl's got it covered, like all time, every time. So we all have our strong suits for sure. Mine is two things mainly.
Yeah.
Um, I'm good at making big rocks into little rocks and then arranging those rocks really nicely, putting some
Okay.
plants in there, putting some branches and
So escaping.
foliage and scaping.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I can humbly say is like probably over half those exhibits at that zoo I've now like built fully myself, and I'm pretty proud of those.
Yeah.
Some of them are
Kudos to you, man.
complete.
That was my takeaway from being there was how beautiful the enclosures were.
I've done a
So
lot with like trying to do biotopes and I mean my favorite one I have in there is the Peely Island one that I made, completely themed after the island with fox snakes and garter snakes in there,
is
and
this new?
native. Sorry.
Is this new?
No, I think you would have. I think you would have seen it.
I don't remember that one for some reason. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
It's got the fox snake and the melanistic garter snake and the other kind of like hypo garter snake in there, and then the native prickly pear cactus. So
Cool.
yeah, I'm pretty proud of a lot of those, and I consistently kind of go in, and that's like one thing that I do. A huge thing that I do is the environmental enrichment. Whereas, like say, um, the other girls, they're really good with like the animal enrichment. They come up with some really creative ideas to get those animals working for their food, getting them solving little puzzles. Really creative in that way, where I'm not in that way at all. um, I'm really good with keeping the enclosures up to date and all that sorts of stuff. And my other good strong suit, I think, is I'm a pretty good handler. So yeah, I do work with most of everything in the zoo, all the venomous and the alligators, crocodilians of all sorts and shapes and sizes. Um, yeah, which again, I'm super privileged to have those opportunities. Yes, I've worked my butt off, and they don't just let people do these things based off working hard. I've earned where I've gotten, but still very very lucky to have the job that I have because I know that there's probably 200 people lined up that would take my job in a heartbeat. So
Maybe
it's
England.
Yeah. So yeah, I do love my job there. It's consistently different every day. Um, I've grown a lot as a person there, just in regards to my interactions with people, guests, like speaking in front of crowds. My first show I did there, I was like shaking in the back, texting Ariana. Oops, name drop. Texting her and being like, "Hey, I can't. I got it. I can't do this. I'm sorry. Like I can't." And she's like, "You literally have to. Like you don't have a choice." And I was like, "Okay." And for the first couple months, every single show I went and did, I would have a tiny little panic attack beforehand. Now I'm at a point where, like last year, I was toting around a 16-foot retic around a stage in front of the Canada Day show down in the Oshawa Lakefront Harbor.
Wow.
Not only with thousands of people around in 30-degree heat on a 360-degree stage, but the amount of Snapchats that I got from people that I grew up with, just like from the crowd distance, being like, "Hey, it's Woodley," and I'm like,
You.
I probably got like 6 or 7 different Snapchats and a couple texts from people being like, "Yo, what are you doing up there, man?" I'm just like, "Guys, stop it. This is already a lot for me,
Already
man.
freaking out.
I'm
Yeah.
already freaking out a little bit here."
That,
So yeah, my public speaking is just exponentially better than I ever thought it could ever be. And continue to advance that use with not only reptilia, but I still run like guided hikes and things like that on my own time.
oh, I didn't know. That's
And
cool.
I
Okay.
run, not run, but I go participate in bio blitzes out in Frontenac Park with Wintergreen Studios, where we take out school camp kids and groups to go out and just show them how to like ethically observe animals and reptiles, and just because obviously a lot of the time, at the end of the day, as much as I want to tell people to be hands off, that's also how kids are gonna
Yeah,
learn to love it, right?
absolutely.
So as long as they know how to do it in an ethical way that's not going to harm the animal, or at least completely send it into utter distress or potentially kill it, yeah, I mean, I think the tiny little bit of stress for picking up a garter snake or like a frog or whatever it may be is worth getting the kids engaged. That's a huge thing that,
Absolutely.
unfortunately, with the bill that you mentioned earlier, that's going to be another thing that potentially affects us, where they will not allow the use of live animals for educational like shows,
Wow.
which would be not only devastating to us, um, just in regards to just a financial standpoint, because that is a huge thing for us. As we do outreach education, we go out to schools. Schools are there every single day. We've had like at least 100 kids in the building at 11 a.m. every single day for the
Yeah,
past 2 weeks.
that's
So
great.
it's that would be hugely devastating, because then at the end of the day, that's I can't walk out on it. As much as I can be a little bit, engaging and animated, there's only so much I can do if I can't let that kid be like, "Hey, here's this turtle. Care about it. Touch it." The
Yeah,
difference that it makes to have the animal in front of people is insane, and the amount of people that have come into that building with horrible fear. Like there was a lady that did not know that the animals came out for the shows. I
yeah.
brought out a Western hognose, tiny little male, and she abandoned her stroller with her 4-month-old baby in it. She ran out of the theater, ran to the front of the building.
Baby's on its own.
Baby's on. I had to wheel the baby up. And because she had no idea that they would actually come out as like the live animals. I ended up, by the end of her visit, where I kind of got her calmed down, and then I ended up bringing out one of the garter snakes. One of them has great demeanor. She's super calm and slow, and just not a skittish snake. And this lady went from abandoning her child in a theater full of strangers to she pet the snake by the end of it. And I don't think
Crazy.
you could physically. Well, of course, you couldn't have physically pet it if I couldn't have the animal there, right? So I think that's a huge factor. with getting this message across. And unfortunately, you do not get this sort of knowledge in school, and that's evident because when I was 19, I picked up a mud puppy and thought it was a mutated fish. So
Yeah,
you
no, they're
don't
not
learn
teaching
about
this
this
stuff in
stuff.
school for sure. Absolutely.
So it's tough when you don't learn it in school, and then there's so many different stigmas and fears about like the amount of people. We have the cotton out there right out front of a theater. I think at least once a week, I have to like go do a little mini lesson because people are like, "This is the one we got here at the cottage," and I'm like, "Oh, at least it wasn't just my dad." And tons of people that do that, and I always hate being that guy where I'm like, "Well, actually," but like
You're wrong.
I just it's I have to like go do a quick little lap, come back, and be like, "Hi, I'm gonna teach you guys something," because I don't want to come off like I'm like, "No, you guys are stupid." And sometimes it is hard to come off like that because sometimes people make some pretty wild claims, and you gotta really hold face sometimes when you do that. But at the end of the day, most of the time, if as long as you hit them with honey, not salt, like a lot of the time, you can really change people's perspective and like kind of be like, hey, that's what that actually is, and they're like, no, and I'm like, okay, well, here's all the
I
reasons why I think
tried.
that's yeah. Well, a lot of the time, people will just reject like the one thing is the lady that was absolutely insistent that her brother had his toe bitten off by a snapping turtle. She's like, I was there. I watched it happen. And I was like, I'm just trying to tell you it's physically impossible. It does not have the power.
They don't have the power to do that?
No. God no. They
Interesting.
have a very sharp beak and it ain't gonna tickle if you get bit by a snapper. But they do not possess remotely the same strength as an alligator snapper, who has the strength to do that, obviously. But they
Mhm.
also specialize in eating aquatic turtles, so it makes sense why their appetite's so strong. Ours, they have a sharp beak and they feed more with like a vacuum method where they'll kind of cock their head back in and then they'll shoot the neck out, which is what usually scares the shit out of people. And as they shoot their neck out, their mouth opens and it basically just creates a vacuum and it sucks whatever in. And the beak or the oh my god, I guess the beak, yeah,
The mouth, the beak,
is
yeah.
the mouth, whatever. The beak, I think the beak's the right term. Sure, we'll go with that. That's just meant for kind of breaking down, tearing off pieces and stuff, but it's not. Anyway, she was insistent because I told him I brought a snapper out for my show. It's like one spiel I really go into because a lot of people think that.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that up until right now, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so a lot of people think it, and I bring them out, and I'm just like, yeah, like at the end of the day, I have a scar, which webcam's definitely not going to show that.
Got bit on the nose by a snapper?
Yeah, that was my own mistake. I was conducting field work, and it was early, and it was like really weird, foggy, and hazy out, and it was like in the mud. I could just see the shell, and it was early, didn't have enough caffeine in me. I was like, all right, I'm gonna pop her out here, and I completely grabbed it backwards, just picked it up by the
Face
sides just
towards
to
you.
pluck
Yeah,
her
yeah, yeah.
out because I didn't want to try and grab it from the back or the because I didn't know how suctioned in it would be in the mud there. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna grab it from the sides and kind of pry her up and out. I literally like as I lifted her up and out, my field partner said something to me, so I kind of turned my head, and as I lifted her up, I turned back, and she gave me a good chomp right on the schnoz, and yeah, I mean I still got it, so it didn't tickle and it bled real good. Beak's sharp, but it's not taking any fingers off and whatever.
We don't have
Either
alligator snappers here, do we? Just the
no,
common.
just commons in Ontario, regardless of whatever pond that people think one lives in Guelph or whatever it is. Come winter, that thing would have died 10 times over. I've heard that one a few times.
Interesting.
So yeah, just commons, and unfortunately, their name kind of lets people not really care about them because common. They're like, oh, there's plenty of them, whatever, sort of deal.
Are
Unfortunately,
they are they endangered?
they're not in danger, but they're classified as a species at risk. And I mean, you could legally hunt them up until 2017, as far as I remember,
Interesting. Interesting.
which was just not sustainable at all. So thankfully that became prohibited. But it all the species that we have are at least special concern. Majority of them are threatened, and yeah, snappers are on their way there. Um, Unfortunately, like road mortality is just horrible for our Ontario turtles. Like
Yeah.
thousands a year get hit on the roads, and unfortunately, the demographic of them is majority it's nesting females that get hit. So it's devastating them over time because their whole biology is live a really long time, lay a whole whack of eggs, and maybe, just maybe, one of those little guys will grow up and replace me when I should naturally pass away,
Yeah.
whether it's predation or just natural passing, whatever. Like a lot of the species in Ontario can push 80 years old easy.
What's
So,
predating snapper?
so they're normal natural predators are raccoons, otters, foxes, skunks. Snappers have the reduced plastron on the belly, so
Yeah.
they can't really retract into their shells. So they're actually pretty susceptible to predation, which is why they're so mean, or what people want
Right.
to call mean, because
Yeah.
they're scared shitless. They're like, wow, I'm so screwed if something gets a hold of me, flips me over, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, big predator for them, I'd say, is mainly going to be otters. Otters are a big predator of a lot of turtles. And it's because they'll target them as well during wintertime, where they're lethargic and
Interesting.
they can't really fight back a whole lot. And I
Not that
mean,
they can fight back in general times anyway.
yeah. So I mean, kudos to the otters for like their whatever their ingenuity. They're pretty cool little critters, and can't be mad at them. They got to eat too, but yeah, they'll predate them. But the issue that turtles deal with mostly in Ontario is the fact that most of their predators are subsidized. So it just means anywhere we are, the presence of their natural egg predators and their predators in general is like 10 times the natural amount. So raccoons, foxes, skunks, they thrive around us, and they're
Interesting.
all the imminent predators for turtles and their eggs.
Egg predators. So is that one of the bigger issues with turtles? Is it that the eggs are getting predated on?
Huge issue is definitely that in areas that humans are more present. And unfortunately, a lot of those predators in those areas have kind of learned like this time of year, go walk around the roadsides. You'll probably sniff something up. I think there was a couple of stats that came out that there's like within 24 hours, there was like a 99% chance of predation in some areas. Like almost no
Wow.
chance that they would not be consumed by predators that night.
They need
Um,
your nest, your next
Nest
nest
protection.
boxes. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people, it's really taken off in Ontario. Like lots of people are starting to do that, which is great. It just has to be done properly because there is a lot of ways people have and can do it wrong. And they either can create like full traffic hazards and get some serious fines because a lot of people will see a turtle nesting, they'll just go throw their own nest box on the side of like a highway. And I mean, yeah, it becomes a roadside hazard. So you have to get special permissions for some places. Um, but and then there's also the case where people will put the nest box and then not put an exit hole, and then they'll just forget about it, and then the eggs hatch, and then they just
You get trapped.
dehydrate. Yeah, they get trapped. So yeah, there's a bunch of good ways that people are helping out in that regard, and the Ontario Turtle Conservation Center just is unreal in regards to what they're doing and trying to help all these turtles that do get ended up hit on the road. I mean, I just delivered one there last weekend
Are
that
you
we
a
found.
turtle taxi too?
I'm not a turtle taxi, mostly just because
Oh,
I don't have an open schedule to be that kind of. I've done it a few times when I've been asked, but um, a couple weekends ago, we were literally just going to walk up an ATV trail with Kenny. I was actually at Kenny's place, and we went to go walk his dog, and we walked up an ATV trail. Knew that it was like primo nesting time. It was humid. It was getting to the evening, and we were like, let's go walk the trail. It's a quiet trail up in kind of like central Ontario near Lake Nipissing. And of course, as soon as we go to walk down this trail, like 9 guys on ATVs come shredding down the trail. So we're like, oh shit. So we go walking down and took 2 minutes. And I found a painted turtle female that got clipped on the back end, full of eggs, but super
That's
full of
nice.
life. So brought her home, kept her there overnight, and then as I drove back home the next morning, I dropped her off at Scales, and they popped her over to the center there. So,
Yeah,
but she was like
fascinating.
biting me, and like I vet raptor, and that's the thing too. A lot of people will try and kind of do. They're doing their best to like help the turtle out. Like they'll find one hit on the road and they put it in water because they're like, oh, maybe he wants water. It's a turtle, which I mean, that makes sense. I get it. People try and do that, and it can unfortunately be fatal because a lot of time they'll just drown. They won't have the ability to lift their head up, or they just get weak from blood loss or whatever it may be. Even though they can deal with some pretty significant trauma, they definitely are not going to be like in their full capacity, right? And then yeah, some people will try and self-mend them, and the big one is they'll see a turtle split open, and then they'll try and like wrap it up to keep it together, not knowing that there's like loose fragment of bone that can actually like push in while they wrap, and it can really speed up that animal's demise in some cases. So you have to be super careful. You have to really know what you're doing if you're going to try and do any sort of self-mending. I'm confident doing it because I've got enough experience doing it now.
Right.
But yeah, definitely one that can backtrack somebody's good intentions. Yeah. So you let me ramble about turtles, buddy. That's dangerous.
Dude, it's nothing dangerous about this. I am sitting here like a 5-year-old child listening to these stories, and fascinating. I really hope, I'm sure, actually, I don't hope, I'm sure that the listeners will enjoy this as much as I'm enjoying this, dude. I'm just sitting back and letting you tell me all these awesome stories. So I apologize. I should be asking you more questions, but you just have some fascinating stories. We are at a minute, an hour and 20 minutes. So I'm going to slowly start to wrap this up. But there is something I want to ask you before we wrap it up. I wanted to ask you about, you talked about you work with venomous species, you work with alligators, you work with all these things. Is there different training that, and I'm throwing it back to the reptilia talk in case
Yeah,
people
yeah.
didn't realize, but um, is there different training that you have to take to be able to work with venomous species? Different training you have to take to be able to work with alligators and crocodiles? Is there different training? You know what I mean?
On paper, in Canada,
Yes.
there's no like our mentorship or anything like that. I mean, I've been mentored by people that, as far as I know, they were trained by previous people that had experience from across the world, and then they were kind of just left to their own devices, and they seem to do pretty good with it. Um, the other one that I've been trained by has almost probably at least 20 years of experience in the field of working with uh, probably every snake under the sun that's ever come through the pet trade. Um, and yeah, I mean, there's definitely criteria, but there's no true like, oh, we're gonna do this venomous snake one certificate sort of thing. Like we all have a leveling system at the
Yeah.
zoo with all the animals just to ensure that just because I can hook up a little 1.5 foot Massasauga Rattler and put them in a bin doesn't mean I can go crack open a black mamba and be like, yeah, it's the same thing. So leveling system is like pretty much the level of certificate that we go by, and it's basically Ariana, the lead. She's a great handler, and she'll run us through all sorts of little sessions with training and stuff like that. The general manager, he's also very well versed, and he's probably one of the best venomous snake handlers I've been witness to. Um, and he's my main mentor in that regard, where he's been teaching me a lot about the working with the elapids and all that sort of stuff. Because once you get to that, it's a whole new level of working with an animal. And yeah, I mean, he kind of got the same thing where he just like got experience from a guy like himself when he was my age, and he's going to pass that on, and luckily he is passing that on to me. But it's a huge trust thing at the end of the day. I think for them, because obviously if you're going to pass that sort of responsibility on to someone, you got to really trust in their ability to do it, and they seemingly do trust me, which I mean, I've given them good reason to. So
Mhm.
yeah, there's no true training for it, but that's why there's only very limited people that do work with those animals, because just not everyone's thing. Yeah. It's the best I can really explain that one. Because honestly, even like when I get asked that, a lot of people will ask, like, can I come get trained and get like a certificate? I'm like, I don't have one to give you, and I can't certify anything for you. I'm just a guy that likes turtles and fungi, man. I don't even know how I got here. I'm here and I'm doing a pretty good job. But I don't know really know how I got here. And as you kind of heard, it's been for almost 10 years just this back and forth between field work, and now I do animal care consulting at different facilities, and um, try and do try and diversify what I do. But yeah, I've been doing animal care consulting at a few different facilities and giving advice. And yeah, so overall, it's just been a lot of volunteering. I did a lot of that. Um, can humbly say, like, yeah, I'm a high school dropout. I never even got my grade 12. Um, and I never went back to school. I started doing all the stuff with Kenny, and I was just like, nah, screw it. I'm a snake guy now, I guess. And it worked out pretty good. Obviously, there's times I think about going back to school and stuff like that for sure, but for now, I'm pretty content.
Yeah, let's actually. This is you. You bring up a great point. We'll wrap up the episode on this. Um, Obviously, there's a lot of people that grow up with the dream of wanting to work in a zoo, wanting to work with animals, wanting to become a zookeeper. Blah blah blah. Is there one piece of advice that you could give the younger generation that are hoping to become anything, just want to work in the zoo field? Anything that you could leave them with to kind of guide them on that path?
Honestly, when it came to this, it's hard because at the end of the day, as much as I do love my job, the animal care field is also a very tough field to stick out.
Mhm.
Um, Animal
Agreed.
care is mentally and emotionally exhausting. Um, whether you do a fantastic job, sometimes the animals just they pass on, and they're animals that you work with every day. It can be tough. All sorts of in regards to like we deal with all sorts of surrenders and abandoned animals, things like that. You really get hit with an emotional toll. Um, Not to mention, it's maybe 10% of the fun that I've described in regards to working with some of those really cool species, training them and feeding them. That's 10% of it. I mean, two days ago, we got contacted by the local, I think it was local police, and they had a deer that just got hit on the road.
Mm.
That's my job. So they brought the deer to Reptilia, and I butcher it for the animals, and that was a 6 hour day of butchering a 250-pound whitetail that had been obliterated by a car. So it was not a pretty or nice job. Um,
Bet it doesn't smell
and
great either.
oh, it was pretty wild. They literally sent me home. They were like, "Buddy, you
Get out of
really
here.
get out of here, dude."
Yeah.
I
Do
was
you
like,
get to keep
"Okay."
the skull?
In that case, no. Crocodiles love it. So keep everything pretty much. The only thing I'll really discard is some of the organs, like digestive tract, things like that. Um, and yeah, like sometimes if like where it was hit is like really gnarly, I won't contend with that, mostly for my own sake, because sometimes they can get hit real gnarly.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, for the most part, like we feed pretty much everything off. I'll save the heart, the liver. We'll feed those off for all sorts of different monitors and things like that. And then I'll take all the quarters and we'll either feed those to the crocs or we'll do suspension feedings to the larger monitors, like the big black throat, the Asian water monitor. We'll just hang up a deer leg and let them have at it for like 6 hours because they can only get so much off of it.
Right.
But and then yeah, it's definitely make use of all that. And yeah, overall, the animal care field is fantastic. It's been very rewarding, but it is definitely a big toll.
Yeah, I'm
Can really
sure.
take on you, and if you're going into it for the money, you're going to the wrong place. Unfortunately, that is one thing that will always happen across the board, whether it's here, and this is not even that I'm to emphasize, not because I'm worried that they're listening or anything, but it's not necessarily a jab at my employer. They are very good to me. It's mostly the fact that it's across the board. So they
Yeah,
know that there's so many passionate, they prey on the passion,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
know that at the end of the day, there's going to be people lined up for that job. If you take your time and you know, there's ways to move up and make a better living out of it. And like, I'm not sitting here in complete despair, but I, you know, I'm not living on a yacht or nothing like that, or
yeah, yeah.
traveling around. The most I do is go on my little backcountry trips in my little canoe and paddle around, do my thing. But yeah, so it's a very rewarding field. You can learn a lot. I've made definitely some lifelong friends and things like that with Reptilia. I've learned an incredible amount from some of the people I've worked with there and mentored me. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I still get to work with animals every day. And like, yeah, maybe I don't make $40 an hour, but I get to go into work and be proud of what I'm doing. Know that like every educational show, at least one kid is going to take away from that, like a very important piece of something.
Yes.
And I mean, there's some people that are members there. We have members that have kids that have grown up from COVID to now, from baby to they're talking and like giving me facts. It's insane. So that is a huge rewarding part for me, is the education part, and like not only seeing people get over their fears, but then it's just seeing the impact you make on certain kids that are just like so enthralled with it there. And they're like, I literally got like a card from like one of the members that we have there. And this little kid's just, I don't know why he's super infatuated with me. I mean, I'm a pretty cool guy, but he's
I would say so.
he's a sweet kid, and he's not even hugely into the animals. He just like likes to be there. And even just that, like, that's a huge thing for me. Is the kids are a huge thing, honestly. That's a major one for me. It's just knowing that kids are at least getting this information from somewhere, because they're not getting it in school. And
Yeah.
yeah.
No, awesome. That's an awesome answer, and I think that's something that many people that want to get into the field need to hear.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, not
yeah,
to be like a pessimist or anything. I just it's the reality of it. At the end of the day, I love my job, but it is a physically demanding job. It's a
yeah,
mentally demanding job, and it can really take a toll on you if you don't know how to kind of pace yourself and know when to like take a step back from things. And I mean, there's been times where I'm just like, hey, I'm not gonna service the venomous animals for like a month. I'm just gonna take a break. And they're just like, okay.
yeah.
And it's just the right thing to do sometimes. If you don't feel you're in the right state, it's probably not the animal you want to be cracking the door on. So
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
yeah.
That is awesome. Eric, my man, that was a fascinating conversation. Like I said earlier, I would love to have you on for a part two, because I feel like we just scratched the surface and there's so much more to dive into. But I had never heard your story, and I very much enjoyed it. And I think I'm sure a lot of the listeners are going to enjoy hearing all this as well. But anyway, I'm rambling. Eric, where can everybody find you? Where can they keep up with you? Where can they see more of this story?
I mean, I try to be as active as I can on social media with Instagram mostly, but honestly, I through the amount that I work and then most of my like backcountry trips, I'm just in zero service. I'm not hugely active, but I am on Instagram on my like wildlife account there, where I'll post the odd time, and when I go out herping and stuff, I'll post there. And um, yeah, that's pretty much my most active platform, I would say. I'm on Facebook and stuff like that too, but like honestly, I just like admin and moderate groups and argue with people on there, and it's the worst. So
So what are the Instagrams?
the one is
Or
the one that I think that's the wildlife is
okay.
that's the main one. And then I got my other one for anybody that's a little camper backcountry boy. That's
Yeah,
also
what
on
was
there
that
too.
one? Hit us. What is it?
Oh, that's just what is that handle, dude? I think it's
I'll
just
find it.
Eric. I
They'll
think it's just Eric F. Woodley.
cool. And
Yeah.
both the Instagrams will be in the description. Go give them a follow. fascinating person, fascinating story, and fascinating Instagram. Honestly, I enjoy following along and seeing all your adventures. I'm gonna make you take me out one day, for sure. But yeah, Eric, thank you very much for coming on, man. Honestly,
Yeah,
this was
man.
a
Thanks for having
very
me. It
cool
was great
episode.
chatting with you.
Of course. We will do it again for sure.
For sure.
Everybody, go follow Eric. The Instagrams will be in the description. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you on the next one.